Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
I treat every player the same. I give everything I have to the time that I have with that player. And that's just kind of always stuck with me, because whether it's Joel Embiid, when they start to see themselves improve, or they start to get it, or they start to perfect that skill in a workout, their confidence starts to improve, and it's like magic. I mean, it's like pixie dust. I mean, it's just something that they start changing, they grow, and it's an amazing thing to see and experience. Whether it's again, self-improvement, seeing a player get better at something is, I think, the ultimate, thing that a coach loves.
Coach Jon Beck played 4 years of Division I college basketball at Arkansas State. He went on to become a graduate assistant coach and get his master's degree at Arkansas State as well. He has coached AAU, youth, middle, and high school boys and girls basketball. Coach Beck has been trained through Nike Skills and Pure Sweat basketball clinics. He has worked Nike Elite camps and completed a summer internship in Los Angeles, California in 2016 for Drew Hanlen of Pure Sweat basketball. There he worked with several NBA players and learned directly from arguably the best skills trainer in the world. Coach Beck now offers individual, small group, and team training, as well as skills academies and team clinics to players as a skills coach for Pure Sweat basketball. Throughout his career, his focus has been on total player development and skills coaching. Jon continually works to improve his craft as a coach while developing great relationships with coaches and players. Coach Beck shares so many great lessons for coaches, players, and parents that he has learned while working with some of the best players and skill development coaches in the world. If you like listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. Every review helps us grow our audience and reach more of the basketball community. Please enjoy this episode of the Hoop Heads podcast with Coach Jon Beck.
Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. Today we are joined by Jon Beck, skills coach for Pure Sweat basketball. Jon, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. We're so glad that you're here to join us and share some of your basketball knowledge with our audience. We want to start out talking a little bit about your playing career and how you got into basketball when you were a kid.
Okay. I grew up in a small town in southeast Missouri, like any small town, I guess you'd say, kind of a not the boot hill, I guess you'd say, from that area. If you call it the boot hill, you'd probably get laughed at. But it's up near the Cape Girardeau area. It's a few hours from Memphis and about an hour and a half south of St. Louis. Grew up in a small town, playing every sport you can imagine. Got to be in about sixth grade, and I was introduced to basketball. Started playing it, started loving it. Actually got a basketball book from one of my coaches. It was by Steve Alford. I believe it was called Guard Development, something like that. Ed Schilling wrote it. Ed Schilling and Steve Alford, I believe, and it was about guard development, and it was not just, shooting and passing and footwork and all that, but it was the mindset, it was the mentality of being a good player, the work ethic and all that. I just kind of fell in love with that book, and I started literally just writing down workouts and trying to make myself the best player I could possibly become. Was kind of a tall kid when I was that age. When I was in 6th and 7th grade, I was probably, 5'8". And so I was a tall kid. I was playing mostly the post, but I always wanted to be a guard and kept working at guard skills. And then worked my way onto the varsity team as a 9th grader. I was the 6th man my 9th grade year. We had a really good year. Went to all the way to the state quarterfinals and played the state champion Cardinal Ritter, which had, I think, 3 or 4 pros on the team at that time. Ended up being a sophomore, started my junior year. My senior year, I was all-state 3 times, player of the region, played in the Missouri State All-Star game. And then I ultimately ended up earning a Division I scholarship to Arkansas State.
So when you were in high school growing up and you're in a small town, did you find that to be a challenge in terms of finding players to play against in your town? How did you go about doing that? How big was the AAU circuit in your life at that time? And did you find yourself having to go outside of your city to go and find games to challenge yourself and to compete against other guys?
And it's crazy because at that time, Arkansas, it was becoming big. AAU was, but I was, and it's crazy because I became a Division I player and I skill developed and I worked with so many AAU programs and AAU players, but I never played an official AAU. I turned down many teams. I had a call from the St. Louis Eagles. I had, big time programs that reached out to me, but I just always felt like I could stay in the gym and keep continuing to get better. I did play some local stuff with guys, from around my area, but it was never officially any AAU. I wouldn't even call it travel basketball. It was like, hey, we're playing this little tournament this weekend at this little town, and we would show up and play. But I just was a true gym rat. I mean, I did things that other kids just didn't do. I came to the gym early at 6 a.m. before school. At football games, when everybody was out at football games, I was inside the gym. I knew a janitor would be in there, or a light would be on, and I could sneak in the gym and get shots up. I just did stuff. I never went to a party in high school, never went to a party in college. I just was a true gym rat. And so I just did stuff that other kids didn't do. And ultimately, without AAU, I made myself a good high school player and ultimately a good college player.
So I have a question about the fact that you didn't play AAU, and does that like kind of affect your perception about AAU and how it's run today, or and how does that, when you work with kids and things, does that affect what you tell them? Do you tell them that you didn't play AAU, but all your hard work really is what made the difference?
I don't. There's so many good things and bad things about high school basketball, and there's so many good and bad things about AAU basketball. But I do tell kids, it's very similar to what Allenstein and Drew obviously have talked about in the past, is that's not what makes you a player. What makes you a player is all the time you spend working on skills in the gym by yourself, with the coach, with the trainer, with your friends. And the AAU is when you get to showcase that. Obviously, AAU, there's very few opportunities in high school where you're going to show up to a gym and there's going to be 100 or 200 coaches in the gym, to watch you play. And so I never tell kids, hey, AAU's bad. Obviously, if I think personally there's a bad AAU situation, then sometimes I'll, say, hey, look, I'll get with the parent and say, make sure you're doing your research. But I'll never steer a kid away from a certain coach or AAU program. It's just, hey, be very intentional about what you're doing. Make sure you do your research. Talk to as many people as you can. So in that sense, no, I don't ever steer them away. And again, they're good and bad to AAU, just like anything.
Going back to your experience as a high school player, I know that hearing what you just said, I can relate to a lot of that mentality that you had when you were in high school. Did you look at some of the things, like you mentioned, not going to parties, not going to football games? And I know I always tell people that on the night of my senior prom, I was at a local community college playing at an open gym where you had to pay $1 to go in and play on Friday nights. And people would always ask me, was that a sacrifice? And I always told them that when I was a kid, I didn't feel like that was a sacrifice at all because I wanted to be in the gym. So how did you have a similar mentality?
It's exactly. I mean, I literally, and people that know me, they'll hear this and laugh, but I have a sick obsession with basketball, and I can't. It was never a sacrifice in any kind of, stretch of the imagination. I mean, it's just something I fell in love with, and I've never looked back. So no, it wasn't a sacrifice. Like you just said, it was what I wanted to do. It's what I still want to do. I mean, I literally had to cancel workouts tonight to talk to you guys. I mean, it's just what I live for. And so, no, it was never a sacrifice, and it's still not a sacrifice. It's what I love to do. It's my passion. I mean, that's the biggest thing I think is just, there's no better feeling in the world than helping kids, helping people just in general, but helping kids even more. And then basketball is my passion. I get to do those things as my job. It really doesn't get better.
Yeah, I think when you have the passion for what you're doing, I think that shows through to kids, parents, coaches that you work with. I think that makes a big difference when you're going out and you're trying to run your training business and you're trying to work with kids. If you bring that enthusiasm and passion and you're able to transfer it to kids, I think you're much, much better off, as a trainer. So how do you go about making sure, other than just the enthusiasm that you bring and obviously you're preparing for the training sessions and all those kinds of things, how do you make sure that passion that you have for the game gets related to the kids and families that you get an opportunity to work with? Well,
I think like you just said, you have to bring a lot of energy. You have to be extremely positive. And you just have to show them that I always just say, look, I'm the ultimate resource when it comes to anything to do, because I've lived it. And so anything to do with basketball, and not just basketball, but nutrition and sleep and, prehab, rehab, whatever it takes, because I've lived it. And, whether it was in the coaching realm or in the playing realm, it's just, I want to be the ultimate resource. I want to add value in any way I can. And so those things you just said, now I never try to compare myself like, oh man, I would have did this, because it's not about me anymore. When you're working with that athlete and that player, it's about them, and they can pick it up real quick if you're making it about you and always comparing it to you and what you did and how you were and what your coach said to you and all those things. They pick it up real quick, and they actually just turn you off. After a while, they just say, no, I'm not going to do that. And I learned that early in my career, coaching high school kids, when I tried to make it about me. And you just get turned off, and you think you're doing a good thing, but you come through some conversations later on, and you say, what did you not like? And they say, well, you always talked about yourself, or you always compared it to your situation, and I'm not like you, and the situation's different. And so you have to ultimately make it about the player. That's one of the big things I do with players now, is we sit down and have a big time talk before we ever work together, and I got to make sure of some things. And so it just comes back to, positive energy, having a great plan, being energetic and all that. And we just go from there and just build it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to approach, the relationship that you're building with a kid and a family. If you're going to work with them over the long term, you want to make sure that there's a good fit, from both sides, and that the kid can get the maximum value out of what you're bringing to the table, instead of it just being a case of, you reminiscing about your own career and telling stories about, this is what I did. And again, we know that basketball, over the course of time, has changed. Probably certainly since you were playing, and certainly since I was playing, it's changed a tremendous amount, just in terms of, the way the game is played, and the 3-pointer and everything that's come into it now. So I think you have to really work to make sure that you're working with the kid in a way that it's a modern feel for what you're trying to do. Let's jump back to you getting recruited to Arkansas State and talk about how that recruiting process went, and if there's anything from your recruitment that, I know we just talked about not necessarily telling stories about yourself, but I got to believe that there's some value in your recruitment that you can pass along to some of the kids that you work with. So talk a little bit about that process, going back to high school and into college.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were college coaches that were saying, hey, when I was younger, you're going to play on an AAU team? And it's like, no. And, believe it or not, back then it didn't turn them off. They were, obviously, I guess they were trying to, please me, but they were saying, hey, that's great. Stay in the gym, keep working, make sure you're working on this, make sure you're working on that. And I kept a notebook, I kept a player notebook, and I wrote down things I had to be really good at. As far as my recruitment, I got offered and recruited heavily by my in-state, I guess in-town school, which was Southeast Missouri State University. They're the Red Hawks. And then I had all the local schools. I had Southern Illinois University, Arkansas State University, UMKC, which is in-state school. I had Missouri State, St. Louis University, and Arkansas State. And I pretty much narrowed it down to, I love St. Louis University because my mother went there, but I narrowed it down to St. Louis and Arkansas State, and then SEMO. Missouri State, I did take, an unofficial visit, and then I ended up playing in the Missouri State All-Star game. They switched coaches, and their coaching staff liked me a lot too. But I narrowed it down basically to St. Louis, and I just wanted to – I knew at that level it was a great conference. I would have a little bit tougher time playing right away. And I really liked I got recruited by Dennis Nutt, who is now – he's been kind of a lot of different places, but he's now the head coach at Ouachita Baptist in Arkansas, a D2 school. And he's had great success. And then his brother, Dickie Nutt, that's his real name.
Poor guy.
We'll leave that one alone.
And Coach Nutt, they're just an amazing family. And there's 4 brothers that have been. Two of them coached at football. Houston Nutt was the coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks for years. But all 4 of those brothers were, ultra successful in their playing days, and went to Oklahoma State, and in their coaching days. And Coach Dickie Nutt, my college coach, actually just he's been at Florida State with Leonard Hamilton for the last few years, but just got a job at Stetson University as an assistant coach. So he was at Arkansas State and then went to Southeast Missouri State. He's been around the block a time or two, but they all had great success. But I just fell in love. We would go to camps in high school there. It was about 2.5 hours from where I lived. I just fell in love with their town. Just they had so much, pride, and I fell in love with their coaching staff. And Dennis Nutt was played in the NBA actually for the Dallas Mavericks, and he's a 6-foot white guy like me, and he was a great shooter, and he's an All-American guard at TCU, and just really took a liking to him. He recruited me very heavy, and just the ultimate decision, it came down to, whether I didn't want to go to St. Louis. I wanted to narrow it down between my, local school at SEMO and then Arkansas State. And I ultimately chose Arkansas State. Just because, at the coaching staff at that time, I was more relatable to, and they had a little bit more success. They went to the NCAA tournament the year before, and, it was a very hot time to go to that school. And they had an All-American point guard, coming back for his senior year, which when I was going to be a freshman, that I like that because I was a shooter. And so that ultimately, there's some other things that came into play. I wanted to get away from home, but not, so far away where I couldn't, my family couldn't see me and my close friends and so on and so forth. So I actually ended up choosing Arkansas State, and I played all 4 years and ended up being a graduate assistant coach. So I had a great career. Ended up third all time on 3-pointers made, and actually led the Sun Belt Conference in 3-point percentage my senior year. So I had a great career. I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you make the right decision, and nowadays we see so many kids, unfortunately, that with the amount of transfers that you see in D1 these days, where kids, and it's trickling down a little bit to high school as well, where kids get into a situation where, they're choosing a school for who knows what reason, and then they get there and it's not always what they thought it was going to be, and then they're transferring because they didn't get enough playing time, or the coach, they turned out that they didn't like the coach, or whatever the case might be. So I'm glad to hear stories like yours where somebody gets to the right place and has, a tremendous career and has a great experience when they get there.
Yeah.
Was the adjustment how was the adjustment for you from high school to college basketball when you walked in as a freshman? How much of a shock factor was it in terms of the level of play, or do you feel like you had been pretty well prepared and it wasn't really that? Not that it wasn't different, because obviously it was, but how would you feel your adjustment was?
Well, you hear so much about, obviously everything is so much stronger and faster and more athletic, and being a 6-foot white guy, you've been told your whole life you're not going to be able to play at that level, and you're not going to be good enough, and you're not, and so on and so forth. It was a huge. I was blessed with athleticism. I was very laterally quick. I was very strong. I lived in the weight room. Even for a guy like me, I came in probably as a freshman at 170, 175 pounds, and but I was strong. I lifted since I was in 9th grade, and I was always into fitness and jumping plyometric boxes. Anything I could do to make myself a better player, I did. And I didn't just do it when I felt like it. I did it all year round and all the time. And so I did everything I could to be the best basketball player, the best athlete I could become. I ran the sprints. I did everything. But as far as the difference, just being able to get your shot off, anytime you want in high school. And I mean, get to the rim and finish. And of course that obviously changes. Your role changes immediately. When you're in high school, you can do things that you obviously can't do at the Division I level. And so I became more of a role player. In high school, I could get to the rim at any time. I was quick enough. I was athletic enough to jump over people and around people. But then when you get to college and you go in there and you got guys on your team that are 7'1" and 7 foot and 6'11", it changes things. And so you became more of a get away from people, run to spots, separate from the ball, get shots, be really good at, knowing the playbook, obviously. But I became more of a role player. I became more of a 3-point specialist coming off. I had to really, be good at coming off, pin down screens. I had to be good at inbounds plays. We're running to the corner. I had to be really good at lifts, drifts, shifts, just moving away from the ball, getting away so I could get separation from my defender, and then be able to ultimately knock down shots. But as far as my role, it was totally different. Now that being said, there wasn't. I said I had a great career. It was by no means. There were plenty of ups and downs. And I tell players all the time that I work with is like, hey, look, whatever role that you have, I've been in that role. So I've lived it. And you go back to comparing, but kids do like to hear that is, hey, look, I've been the guy that's the player of the game. I've been the guy that's the guy they video on ESPN before the game. They got the camera in your face and you're shooting the warm-up shots and chewing gum. And I've been the guy that never gets in the game. Literally will sit there the whole game and just cheer. And I've been the guy that comes off the bench. And I've been the guy that, and so I've been in every role. But I never whined and complained. I didn't, I'm going to go transfer. I'm going to do this. It was just, what do I have to do to become better? What do I have to do to outcompete the next guy? And I try to do everything I can. I lived in the training room, and I was never injured. Luckily enough for me in my college career, I only missed, I think, 2 practices and maybe 2 games my entire career in 4 years. But, I just did everything I could to become the ultimate, student athlete, not just, on the playing floor, but in the classroom as well.
Okay, so you talked about the transition from high school to college. What was the transition like coaching as a grad assistant at Arkansas State after you played there?
It was tough. That first year, it was an unusual situation because I was actually teammates with the guy, and then all of a sudden, I'm the graduate assistant. I'm in a coaching capacity, but I'm still his roommate. And so I was his roommate when I played my senior year, and then I'm his roommate, when I'm coaching him. And so that was tough. But
you had an inside ear to the locker room. That's what I hear. You had
Absolutely. And when you're a graduate assistant, I mean, I've done things people don't even believe, and gladly so. I mean, I was that guy again. I was a basketball junkie, and when you're the graduate assistant, literally, stuff runs downhill, and I was the guy that was at the very bottom of the hill. And so it was anything you can think of. I mean, Coach Nutt was, he had me working for sure. But I never whined and complained. It didn't matter what he said to do, I would do it. I mean, there was times when, his mom would come in and watch the game, and they would go out afterwards and celebrate and go eat a good meal, and he'd hang out, and she would see the grandkids, and then Coach Nutt would call me, it'd be 11:30 at night. Hey man, drive my mom back to Little Rock for me. Little Rock's 2 hours away, and it's 11:30 at night. I'm like, okay,
So you were the first Uber.
Absolutely, I was the original Uber for sure.
There you go. You should have had your business.
But, hey,
you should have had your business plan. That's awesome.
I would drive her straight to Little Rock and drive straight back, and get back at 3:30 in the morning and whatever. But I had to go pick up recruits' parents. There was just so many things I had to do. I would drive him, literally 6-8 hours straight to Oklahoma. We'd watch a JUCO game, and I would drive straight back. We'd drive all night. It'd be 5:30 a.m. And there were so many things that I did. I'd pick up dry cleaning. I would drop him off at piano lessons. I mean, anything I could do, I did it. And so, and I don't take those days for granted at all, because that was an opportunity for me. It came down once I finished my playing career, I had to decide, do I want to go play overseas? I had a few overseas options, and not making incredible money, but making a couple $1,000s a month. Obviously, tax free and being able to live comfortable. But at that time, I thought, man, I've always loved coaching and player development. And at that time, I just made the decision. It wasn't even the thing that I had planned. In my mind, I was just going to go be a junior college or try to go be a GA somewhere else or whatever. And then all of a sudden, they offered me that position. It just kind of came available, and so. I didn't hesitate. As soon as I said, absolutely, yes, sir, I will, and so, and the kind of the rest is history. Ended up getting a master's degree out of it, and so it was a great opportunity for me. Little
did you know you were going to start Uber when you did that, right?
Exactly. I should have. We wouldn't be talking right now.
That's right. Yeah, we'd have you on an entrepreneurs podcast. We'd have to go a different route with it. So
that's right.
what did you learn as a graduate assistant? What did you learn about college coaching that was different from your perception of it when you were playing? And obviously for you, it was a really big change because you were within the same program. So you kind of got to see the other side of that equation, that you go through 4 years as a player, and obviously you have your good times, and I'm sure you had your challenges with the coaching staff at times as you're going through. So now all of a sudden you jump from the player side to the coaching side. What was different about that experience than what you might have thought it was going to be like going in?
Well, it's like as you know, any player, they think that, and I knew, I've studied the game and I've studied coaches my entire life, and so I knew that it was different. But all the other players that didn't, they're like, man, the coaches don't even do anything. You know, that we do all the work. We got to do this, and so. And that's literally what players to this day, I think, you know, they think. And once I realized, I got over to the GA, and you think about it in your mind, but you really don't realize how much time and things they have to do. They work 10 times as hard as the players. Now, I know they don't have to go and physically do, you know, that. But as far as just travel arrangements, you know, having to do plane tickets and all the paperwork, the office work, the budget work, the scheduling, the travel, the academic advisors for players, scheduling basketball camps. I mean, recruiting, it's just I could go on and on. It's a relentless, it never stops. I mean, literally, that's the best way to say it, is it just never stops. And it's just, there is constant communication and meetings. And it's not that I didn't enjoy those things, but it was just, man, when you got on that practice floor, you could just tell that everybody changed. It was like those guys, most of the guys that, you know, I coached with in the D1 level, they were all former players, you know, at a college level or a professional level. And so you get on that practice floor, and it's just a different, you know, and it's just, you have to do the other stuff to get to obviously the practice and the games and be on the floor. And that's just the most fun part. But man, that's not what coaching is. It's not just, you know, and I know a lot of fans even think that, like, all the coaches just go on, put on a suit and put on a dress watch and go out there and coach. And just, you know, they practice a few times, you know, a week or whatever, but that's all they do is just coaching games. And man, it's just so much more than that. If you know, people had an idea of what goes on behind the scenes, they would think obviously a lot differently.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great TV show, to be able to get kind of the hard knocks, to be able to go behind the scenes of a big time program and really see what the coaching staff is doing on a day-to-day basis. I do know that, you know, as a player, when I was playing, you do have the perception of, you know, we got practice for, you know, 2.5 hours today, and, you know, what are they doing from, you know, 7 a.m. to, you know, 3 p.m.? How long can it take to plan a practice? And you don't realize, again, especially when you're an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, you don't realize all the things that go into, you know, building a successful program, as you described. So when you finished up as the GA, and then you said, okay, what's my next step? And I know you got your degree in education. So obviously, let's ask this question first. Was there a time where you knew you wanted to teach? Is that why you got your degree in education? Did you always kind of think, yeah, I'm going to be a teacher and a coach? Or was that something that just kind of happened more once you were kind of in school?
Yeah, it was always, I never had, you know, a mindset of I'm gonna go and teach. It was just, you know, I started off as a physical therapy, you know, major. I changed that and I went into exercise science, and then I changed again. It's, you know what, I just want to coach. You know, what do I have to do to just go be a coach at the JUCO level or the college level? And so, you know, I just went with physical education. I mean, obviously that just always came natural to me. And so I went, you know, that route. And then I did that, you know, when I went and got my master's, I did the same exact thing. My master's degree, I just went ahead and went into education. But I always just said, I got to coach ball. I got to be around basketball. And if I'm around basketball in some kind of capacity, I'll be a happy guy. And so that's kind of the way that I went into it. Once I graduated, I was actually going to interview for a junior college position at Mineral Area Junior College. And one of my close friends and actually assistant coach in my high school program was an assistant there. And I pretty much thought it was a done deal. And then plans changed. And kind of like everything else does, I got a good high school opportunity and and it was a losing situation. And obviously, you don't want to come in after John Wooden coaches, and so you come in after somebody that's did a good job, but unfortunately the wins just weren't there, and so come into that situation, and obviously you just try to build that and build on the 2 seasons they had prior. I think they won 3 games, and so you just tried to make the best you could out of that opportunity. I ended up taking a high school job instead of the junior college job.
And so did you, if you had been presented with another college opportunity, like if you had a choice between, if you had to go back and look at it, and if you had a college job offered to you and a high school job offered to you at that time in your life, which one do you think you would have chosen?
Well, in hindsight, it's easy to say the college job, but that
Right.
would make me the person I am today. That would make me, I have so many, and ended up in high school. I coached in so many different capacities. I coached junior high, I coached high school girls, high school boys. Had a lot of success with the boys, and ended up coaching the girls. And so it wouldn't make me. To be honest, I'm glad that I did the decision, that I made. I'm glad I stuck with it, because it's made me who I am today. And I've had so many different, teachable moments, whether it be the kids. I never thought in a million years I would coach girls ever, and then you end up coaching girls, and you actually I just found out that I love it. It's made me a way better coach. And I think it'll make me a better husband. It'll make me a better father one day. I just think that coaching girls has been a true blessing. And then now obviously I work with just as many girls as I do boys. And so again, I think everything's kind of, works itself out for a reason. And no, I'm happy with the choice I made. I wouldn't turn around and make a different one.
Yeah, for sure. So how did it come about that you had an opportunity to coach the boys and the girls? Which one did you do, the boys first and then switch over to the girls? Were you doing them?
Yeah.
How
Did
did
the
that-
boys?
how did that
We actually we won. We went from 3 wins to 30 wins in our first year, and went to the state tournament. Ended up getting to the Final Four, and then turned around the next year. And we were mostly juniors that year, so turned around the next year, ended up winning 32 games and getting back to the Final Four again. Lost to the same. There's a state champion both those years that we ended up ultimately, losing to, and they were a really good team. But going from 3 wins to 30 and then 32 wins back to back. And then it was one of those things where the girls coach at that time wasn't having a lot of success, and they just said, "Hey, is there any way you can coach the girls too?" And so
So you did both at the same time?
did both.
my
Yeah, in
gosh.
Tennessee.
Wow, that's
In Tennessee, they play on the same nights, so it's different than some states. They play different nights, but they actually play the girls' game kind of right before the guys' game, and so, we just made it work. And then we actually took the girls' program, who's never been to state, and then took them to state. Ended up losing in the first round at state, but had a lot of success. Turned the program around where it's a state contender every year, and so. And again, this goes back to, building that positive culture and getting things going the right way.
So what'd you do? How did you have to do that? When you come in and you're in a program where you win 3, where the program's won 3 games, and now you say, okay, we obviously have to change things. What's the first thing you look at, or what are some of the things that you say, these are the non-negotiables that I have to get into this program in order for us to be successful?
Well, it's just making everything, about competing every day, about doing the best you possibly can, about being process oriented, and just completely changing the culture. We're going to compete, we're going to win, we're going to do everything we can. We're not going to sit around and make excuses, and just accepting no excuses, and just making it, obviously you got to make it fun. It's still kids. And like you said, the games change even from when, we played, but it's just about ultimately making everything culture based, and it's about the process, and about we're going to get better, and we're going to compete, and we're going to end up ultimately winning. And you just got to win each day and take it one day and 1 week at a time. And it ends up, once it starts changing, it just spreads like wildfire. And then obviously, you get into the youth development stuff, and that obviously helps too. It starts at the youth levels, and then but once you get a program going, I mean, it doesn't look back. You're going to have some up and down years in high school, just because, the players are going to be, a little bit less talented year to year. but you can still stay competitive, and that's what you want to do. Just kind of keep your head above water and stay competitive in the years that you don't have maybe as talented of players. But then, like I said, it comes and goes, and as long as you have a good, positive culture and a good program, you're going to end up being successful in the long run.
All right, I want to go back to something we just you talked about a minute ago. You talked about how you coached both the boys and the girls. I coached both boys and girls middle school basketball teams, and I know how difficult it is to switch between like a boys basketball team and a girls basketball team. How difficult was it? Like, because the pace of play is different and the way that they go about playing the game is different. So how did you handle that, and how hard was it for you at the high school level to do that?
I mean, it's tough, but all the things you hear about it when you're going to coach girls, you hear so many negative things. I did, and it wasn't like that. It was just, you hear so many things. Obviously, the game's a lot slower. Things happen a lot slower with the girls' game. But as far as, you hear about, they're going to be this and they're going to be that, and those things just never happened. I never thought, for whatever reason, maybe we had great girls, but they worked extremely hard. We actually had a very, similar system, play fast. We press full court. We try to get, a shot in 10 seconds or less, but changing the culture, having a fun, exciting style of play obviously helps too. But no, I mean, we literally, if you scouted the boys' game, you would know what our girls are going to do, and vice versa. And so there wasn't much of a difference. I mean, again, it took a few years for the girls to program. It wasn't, a complete turnaround right off the bat. It took a few years to get that culture and going in the right direction. But once we had a few good players, we were nationally ranked one of those years. And we had a couple, I think 2 or 3 years there where we had, 28 plus wins. And again, I mean, it's a little bit slower, obviously, but as far as the style of play, it didn't change.
What was the biggest difference in terms of how you had to go about teaching the game and building your team camaraderie between the boys and the girls? That's one of the things that I've found. I have a daughter who's in 9th grade who I've coached her summer team and her AAU team over the last 3 or 4 years, and then I have a son who's in 7th grade and I've coached him, and it's just such a different dynamic trying to build team cohesion with the boys versus the girls, and also just the way that each gender kind of approaches that. So how did you look at trying to make sure that your team came together as one, and then what, in terms of your coaching style, did you have to adjust between the boys and the girls?
I mean, again, there's really not much of a difference. I know there's obviously a difference. Like, for instance, if you have a bunch of guys in the gym, and it won't take them long they'll start shooting a few shots and they'll pick up teams and they'll start playing. And you get a bunch of girls in the gym, and literally if we don't say, hey, let's go, you got to pick up teams and play, they'll just sit there and talk and shoot for 2 straight hours, and then they'll just say, okay, let's go. We had a great workout.
Right, practice is done. Right, here we go.
But as far as the philosophy and the camaraderie at the school I was at, again, it was just such a, the coaching staff coached both. And so it was almost like they just all became a family. The boys and girls were just, you knew you had players on both teams that would come in and get extra work in, and you had a lot of things in high school, a lot of things that are tough as from a coaching aspect is just, in general, players are lazy, and you don't, you wish they were not as lazy as they are, but they are for the most part. That's one of the things I love about training players is you have so many players, the players that you work with, they all love it. They're all doing the extra. And so, when you're coaching in high school, you have what you have, and if you have 20 or 30 players, the vast majority are going to be very lazy players. They're not going to they just want to come in and practice, and that's good enough, and let's go. Let me get out and do my own thing and whatever. And so, but as far as the girls and boys, again, philosophy wise, it didn't change much. Obviously, you have your differences, but I can't think of just any major differences.
Yeah, understood. I think that, what I guess for me that I've noticed is that it was easier to, the girls wanted to do more bonding type things, whereas the boys were just, hey, let's come in and compete, and we're friends and we're doing things, but the girls really wanted to talk and work together and develop that friendship. And I think they played better. When I've had situations with my daughter where she's been close with her teammates, the team has been better, not just off the floor, but on the floor when everybody gets along. And so I think that is more important, at least I've found on the girls' side sometimes than the boys' side, where I can have a teammate as a boys player where I may not get along with that guy, but on the court we can figure it out. Whereas with girls, sometimes I've found that that's maybe a little bit more of a challenge.
Oh, you're exactly right on that. That's a great point. I mean, a girl will hold a grudge. I mean, even to a coach. A girl will hold a grudge to a coach or a girl for it's amazing how long it'll last. And maybe that's the differences in boys and girls. But, you can just say something wrong to them and they won't talk to you for a week. They won't even look at you for a week. Whereas, like you said, guys, in that instance, they'll just, hey, man, they'll fight their teammate and the next minute they're high-fiving and going out to eat, And so it's very different in that realm for sure.
So you talked about getting your team to compete every single day. How do you go about, if another coach is out there listening, what are some ways that you develop that will to compete? And again, you're talking about kids that, and the average kid on a high school team, like you said, may not be the hardest working player. So how do you get those kids to buy into the idea that we're going to compete every single day? Is there certain drills that you use? Is there certain language that you use? Is there certain expectations that you set for them? How do you go about making sure that happens?
I mean, the easiest answer is you just make every single thing you do competitive. I mean, literally, you make everything. And that's kind of the thing about being a great player is the three questions I ask. Like if I'm going to work with a player reaches out to me or the parent says, hey, I want you to work with, my daughter or son, I say, do they love basketball? And I don't mean just playing basketball. I mean all those other things that come with being a player, the conditioning, the weight room, the sprints, the circuits, the going to class, the being held accountable, all those type things. And so you have to make everything competitive, not just the stuff on the floor. I mean, like for instance, I work with Fayetteville High School. I know you guys did a great podcast with Brad, Coach Stamps. And, they have a point system where literally they compete. Let's say they got 15 guys and they're all in, 3 teams of 5. And they'll say, hey, we're gonna compete on this right here, or this conditioning aspect today. We're gonna compete, and whoever wins gets so and so points. And they have a point honor system, and they make every single thing they do competitive. And I mean, and Coach White, there's so many different programs in this area. I've been so blessed to work with all the different programs, but the really good ones, they just make everything competitive. Whether it be shooting drills, whether it be in the classroom, off the court stuff. In the community, they make everything team, and compete. And so, just Monday, I've actually been hired by Fayetteville to do kind of their strength and conditioning. And, they have their own point system. And they said, hey, look, I threw my little kind of twist on it. We're going to do this. We're going to do sprints around the top, and we're going to get into 3 teams. And they said, hey, look, whoever wins, you're getting 3 points for your team. And and everybody's like, all the kids are like,
right. That's a lot of points. Holy cow, we're ready.
That's awesome. That's a big thing. That's a big thing. So, obviously just making everything you do, make it competitive, have a time and score, have a winner and a loser. And, that's how it's ultimately going to end up being, in the games.
So as you get that going, and now you've been, at your school for 11 years, I believe you were there, right?
Yes.
And so at the end of year 11, what happens that causes you to say, hey, I think I want to go a different route? How does that come to pass? That, we all know that, Jason's a teacher, I'm a teacher. And so we've both been in education for a while. And we know that in education, in a lot of ways, incentivizes you to stay, with the retirement system and all those kinds of things. So what sort of changed for you that made you decide, hey, I want to strike out and approach basketball coaching from a different perspective?
Well, ultimately, to answer that in one single phrase, is Drew Hanlen. But to get to that point, I always loved skill development because that was the player I was. I knew that I could make myself a better player. I knew that I could outwork people. I knew that I could work on things that translated to games. And so I went to everything that Drew had. I'm a basketball junkie, and so he's a Missouri guy. Some of the same guys that recruited me recruited Drew, and I'm a little bit older than Drew, and they would say, man, there's a guy that reminds, us of you, Drew Hanlen in St. Louis. And so I knew him even when he was in high school and I was playing in college. And I went to every single thing he had. I ended up coaching with a guy that was actually one of his teammates at Belmont. And so he's like, man, you remind me of Drew Hanlen. Oh my God, and it's just like, what? He's like, you don't even know. And I was like, I know Drew, And so I went to every single thing. Drew's had several coaching clinics and coaching academies, and there's not been one that I haven't been at. And I've recorded it, and I've taken notes on it, and I just always love that aspect. And I begged that guy for jobs for years. I mean, I just said I want to be a part of Pure Sweat. I want to be a skills trainer. And again, it wasn't because, to be honest, I have to be challenged. And at the high school level, it's not that I'm above and beyond, but it's just like you just constantly think about basketball, and you're at the high school level and you're doing all the things. You're doing cafeteria duty and lunch duty and getting on school buses and doing all the things that you have to do just to get to the part of the day that you love. And so, and again, it's not like I didn't like those things. I was a great teacher. I loved, I was a level 5 teacher. I loved doing those things. I loved being around kids. I loved teaching. But I begged and begged and begged him, I think, for 5 years. I mean, I literally filmed workouts. I came to the gym every morning at 6 a.m., even when I coached, and I'd offered kids, free workout. Every day for 11 straight years, I'd just come to the gym early, and kids would come in and shoot, and I'd take them through workouts. I would film those, upload them to YouTube, send them to Drew, beg him for jobs. And for whatever reason, just, hey man, we're not hiring anybody at this time. My company's kind of grown, and we're just not hiring anybody. Hey, but we always kept touch, over those years. And every time you have an academy, I just basically never took no for an answer. I was just relentless. So finally, after, probably 4 years of just mistiming and just begging, he said, hey, look, I'm actually going to move to Los Angeles, California. And he said, I got to have interns for this summer when I moved there. And he said, man, we've got like 1,000+ applicants, but we're going to narrow it down to 4 guys. And we want to hire 2 of them. And so, you're uploading videos and why you'd be good. And it was just a process. And Jason Fry at that time was the Pure Sweat, coach's director. And, ended up giving me a call. Hey man, I think, we got it narrowed down to about 50 guys. You're one of them. And it was like an exciting time. And just like, I want to be an intern. I'll do anything I can to go out there and be an intern. And so Drew calls me and says, hey, I just want to let you know we're kind of knocking some guys out because it's going to be an unpaid internship. You're not going to get paid a dime. We're not going to provide you with any travel. We're not going to provide you with meals. We're not going to provide. I said, it doesn't matter. I said, I'll do whatever I have to do. So I think all those years, whether I built respect or for whatever reason, I got picked as one of the 4 guys that went out there. And then ultimately, I was one of the 2 guys that ended up getting hired. So it was a great opportunity. Drove there in mid-June 2016 and didn't end up driving back till, I think, August 1st. So lived out there for a good month and a half. And literally, I think I got to L.A. like at 2 o'clock. And I texted Drew and said, hey, man, I'm here. I'm going to kind of check into this Airbnb. What are you thinking about? What's it looking like for tomorrow? And he said, literally, he texted back and said, 3 o'clock, Beverly Hills High School. And I'm just like, okay, it's like 2:15, and I don't know. I'm in LA for the first time in my life, a small town Missouri guy, and
it might take you 4 hours to get there in LA too. And
the funny story is that I'm glad you said that, because I get in this Airbnb, and I haven't even had a shower. I mean, I've driven the entire day, I think 7 hours that morning. And I look it up on my maps, and I'm like, oh man, what? I'm 2.3 miles away from Beverly Hills High School. That's nothing, And so I leave at like 2:20, and I get there at 3:10, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh,
you already got fired before you got fired before you even got hired.
Exactly. And so I get to the high school, and I text him. I said, Drew, I'm here. Am I in the right place? There's two big, high school. There's two big gyms. There's one with a pool in it. I don't know if I'm. He said, no, you're good. We're about to walk up. LA traffic's crazy. It's like, okay. So, and literally here he comes. He walks in with Sam, his videographer, and Jordan Clarkson, and that's it. I mean, it was like, boom, I'm working out a Los Angeles Laker. And, man, literally when I tell you, people just don't understand. Like, you see stuff online on social media about Drew, but you just have no idea how hard that guy works. I mean, I thought I worked hard, and I thought I was a basketball junkie. And I literally, that first night I went to bed, I think we got done at the gym around 1 a.m. that first night. And I said, there's a guy out there that loves it way more than I mean, there's a guy out there that's that, dedicated to his craft. And, but yeah, it was Jordan Clarkson. I think David Lee walked in after that, and then Andrew Wiggins came in, and we had he said, hey man, we got about an hour break, get a smoothie or something. We're going back over to this other high school. And then I think we stayed in the gym till 1 a.m. that first night. And, man, it was literally like that for a month and a half straight. It was 12 to 14 hour days. And some days it would be 2 or 3 o'clock, and I'd be like, Drew, we hadn't ate anything yet. He's like, oh, I know, man. I know. It's, welcome to my world. It's just like, golly, So you got good at, going and getting snacks and just trying to, get stuff you could between little workouts. But yeah, what an amazing opportunity. And I tell people all the time is, look, I'm not the best trainer in the world, but I really feel like, arguably the best trainer in the world I got to learn from. And I didn't get to learn from, like, now he lives in a perfect world. So he likes to say, where he has, 20, 30 interns at a time. I mean, it's crazy. Right. I mean, you see it on social media, but when I was there, it was very few interns. He had just moved there. I mean, he didn't even have a bed in his apartment. I mean, he was like, hey, Beck, I got to go get my bed. We're going to have to cancel workouts this morning. I mean, it was crazy. But of course now, with just seeing the success he's had and the players he's reached, it's amazing. And I was there, obviously, I've been there since the beginning. I mean, when he was working out, Bradley, and he was really young, and David Lee, and just even Jordan Clarkson when he was in college, and I was there for those workouts, and to see how hard he's worked and what he's became now, it's just been amazing.
So what was it? Obviously now he's established and he's got his business, and you talked about how hard he works. But what was it when you first decided and you first thought, hey, I really want to work with this guy? Because what was the reason that initially attracted you? Because obviously at the first time when you saw him and you became aware of what he was doing, he didn't have the same name and reputation that he does now. So obviously you had to see something in him that said, wow, I really want to work with this guy. What was it besides just hard work? If you're looking at it from the outside, what are you seeing in him that made you say, I got to go learn from this guy?
Absolutely. I mean, Drew, I'm a very confident guy, and Drew takes it to a different level. So ultimately just his confidence, is something that it strikes you because he just has that personality. But he's just a great person. And I mean, his attention to detail, how much of a teacher he is what ultimately, because that's what it comes down to. I've worked with several, Division I coaches and even NBA coaches, in different capacities, and just how amazing of a teacher, the nuances, the micro skills, just the very fine details of the game and of skill development, how he sees things and how he reverse engineers things. He's a big time film geek, and so am I. I mean, I watch, it's funny because even in my high school days, I would watch 4 or 5 hours of film a day. I mean, that's what I did. I'd work out, I'd go watch film. I don't have TV. I haven't had TV in, years. And I've just been an ultimate film junkie. And then it's like, okay, I think I saw him speak one time, and he goes, I watch, he's like, Sam, how much, what do we say? Probably 6-8 hours of film a day. And it's like, golly, man, this, how can this guy watch more film than I watch? But
you thought you were the only guy.
It is, and that's what I thought. Is like, I literally went to sleep that night, and I thought, man, there's a guy out there that lives it, breathes it more than I do, and it still drives me crazy because I'm a competitive guy, and I just, it raises your game, and it's not a comparison game. It's just a competing game. You want to be better. And when you see a guy that's that dedicated to his craft, you say, man, I got to be better. I got to be better for my players. I got to be better for the game. I got to be a better teacher. And so to learn from him, literally, and I took a notebook and I had my phone with me, and after every workout, I would go over to it and I would write everything I could down, and I would put everything I could into my phone, and I would take a bite of a cheese stick, and it would be like, let's go back, and they'd be right back to the next workout. And I mean, it was just a relentless thing. And it's crazy because you think you work hard, in high school. Oh, I'm coaching boys and girls and I work hard. But you go out there and you literally go 12, 14-hour days. You don't get down at the gym till 2 a.m. And you realize what hard work is. He has a great quote. He says you can actually work a lot harder in a day than you think you can, And so he definitely tested the limits. It literally took me, and I'm a very physically fit guy, and it took me a good week and a half to get used to being on your feet that long, being that detailed, staying that much awake. I mean, it was just, you have to be on. It's not like he takes he treats, Joel Embiid and Jason Tatum the same way he treats David Lee, a guy that's, 1 year away from retirement at that time. I mean, it's just, he's always on. He doesn't take a minute off, a day off. There's just so many things that I would write in my notes and I still look at from time to time that are just really amazing.
So in the training that you're doing now, how much film work do you do in terms of, when you say you're watching film, are you watching film of college players and pro players to watch footwork, to watch technique, and then taking that back to the players that you work with? Or are you filming workouts with the players that you're actually training and then going back and looking at what they're doing? Or is it some combination of both?
Well, I obviously watch film at the highest level, just because, that was as much as my job out there with Drew as anything was, he immediately gave us access to Synergy and taught us how to break down film. And we had as many film projects as we did, the physical workouts. It was like, hey, I mean, literally he would say, hey, let's go, you interns. And he would say, hey, you got these 10 games from January 26th, to February 16th. And you got these 10 games and so on and so forth. When I work with players now, obviously when you first work with them, you talk to them. But one of the first questions I ask is, I'm going to talk to your high school coach or your junior high coach or your college coach or whatever it is. I work with so many college and high school players, but whether they like that or not, I'm going to talk to their coach, and I've had a few, it's not many, but I've had a few players say, oh man, I don't really want you talking to him. I don't want you talking to her. And it's like, well, and I've had to turn people away. I said, well, then if I can't talk to them, it's probably not going to be a great fit for us. And then they'll change their mind. They'll say, well, okay, but let me tell you that, and so I end up talking to that coach. Ultimately, I get as much film as I can of them. And some players, obviously, it's a lot easier to get access to than others. But even with high school players, you have huddle, you have crossover, you can get access. The high school coaches are very, good about that. And then obviously, we break down things and get to a plan. But obviously, I'm not going to sit there and compare a high school kid's footwork to an NBA player's. I try to make everything as relatable to that player at that time of their development as I can. So I'm not a trainer, and Drew obviously taught me that is, I'm not gonna take a guy like Jason Tatum, who's one of the most, offensively skilled guys ever, and, try to make, my 15-year-old kid that's a freshman at a high school, work on those kind of moves. And so make everything relatable and game-like, and, just ultimately be able, if you could sum up what I do and what our Pure Sweat guys do, we ultimately just get boys, girls, guys and girls really good at what they do in games. Get them really, really comfortable. They just can't mess it up. Find out what their role is and just perfect it. Get them really good at that.
And so you have to know what that role is. Obviously, that's a key to being able to do that and that's where your conversation, your relationships with the high school coaches really comes into play. I know one of the things that, a lot of times I'll see with trainers, around here is people kind of just have a standard workout that they throw together that doesn't go to that level of specificity in terms of talking to the high school coaches and finding out, even from the kids themselves, what are the things that you're actually going to do in a game. And so by you doing that, I'm sure that allows you to provide much more value than the average skills trainer who's out there in the business.
Absolutely. And again, that's learned from Drew, because I've been that high school coach that, hey, we're going to work on this and we're going to do these things. And it's the same thing for every kid. It's the same thing for every guard. It's the same thing for every post player. And, literally hundreds of workouts with Drew, no two workouts were the same. And I asked him one time, I said, Drew, how do you do that? Like, do you have he's I just make up stuff as I go. He's like literally just in his head. And back then that was crazy to me, but then that's literally what I do now. It's like now obviously I know what they have to be really good at, and we've already went through a lot of stuff. And so, when I meet with a player, obviously watch film, get to know them, get to know as much about them off the floor and on the floor as you can. And then we sit down, we do, and again, everything is learned from Drew, but we do a SWOT analysis. It's a business model. It's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so I think at the high school, and college type age in their development, I think you need to really, really, obviously you want to attack threats first, anything that people just can't do. So if you have something that keeps you off the floor, or you can't finish left-handed, or you can't dribble left, you have to attack those things first. But I think college, high school players, it should be a 75-25 ratio on practicing your strengths versus your weaknesses. Again, it goes back to be really good at what you do in games. And so you meet with the player, you sit down, you say, hey, look, let's do a SWOT analysis. I've already done mine because I've already got as much information. I've watched film and I know what their high school coaches told me. And then we say, okay, here's what you think about yourself. Here's what I kind of think and your high school coaches think. And then, you have to have a plan to be really good and to develop to be the best player you can be. You have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're just wasting time. You go in the gym and work on things that you shouldn't. And literally in an off season, I tell a kid, hey, look, we're going to lock in on, 2 to 3 things maximum. We're not going to sit here and try to do, 10 different things that you want to do. And so I have them write down what they want to get good at, and then I have them rank those things, and it may be 10 things. And I say, okay, now let's rank them. And they say, okay, I think this. And okay, so now let's get it down to 5 things. So now let's rank those. And so you ultimately, again, I just lock in on 2 or 3 things maximum for each player and just get really, really good at those things. And that's literally how we do it.
Yeah, I love what you're saying in terms of the amount of time that you're spending in preparation for working with a kid. And I think that's something that I'm sure, without a doubt, sets you apart again from the average person who's out there working out kids, because not many people are willing to put in that kind of time, again, outside of the time that they spend with a player on the floor, really getting to know that kid's game, really getting to know them as a person, maybe even getting to know the parents and the families, because obviously the parents are the ones probably footing the bill. So it's important to be able to, to build a relationship with them as well. And I think just like any other situation in life, when you have a good relationship with the person that you're working with, you're much more likely to get them to buy into the things that you're trying to get them to do and the things that are going to help them ultimately to be successful. So I think that's got to be a great business model for you that, again, comes from the top down, from Drew all the way down to guys that are in your position.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And that's another thing that jumped out to me is just how much, off the floor stuff and the camaraderie and the way he can joke and he can talk stuff to them, and they again, it's about relationships, and that's the number one thing. Is if you can relate to a kid. I mean, like I just tweeted out the other day, coaching is about connection. If you can't connect with that kid on a personal level, on and off the floor, you're not going to be able to ever get the buy-in that you want to ultimately have them work as hard as you want them to work during the workouts to become the player they're capable of becoming. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And so, like you said, it all goes back to relationships. If you can't connect and you can't, they have to know that you really care about them. And after that, man, it just becomes a great working relationship.
Do you think that's changed in the time that you've been involved in basketball in terms of the player-coach relationship and the importance of that? Or do you think, I guess I look back on the time maybe when I was playing, and it seems like there was more of the Bobby Knight, for lack of a better way of saying it, the Bobby Knight style of coaching where the coach was kind of up on the pedestal and the players were down below, and there wasn't necessarily the importance placed on the relationship. Do you think that relationship building is even more important today than it was, say, 15 or 20 years ago, or do you think that it was similar back then? I'm just curious to hear your opinion on that.
No, my opinion, it's way more important now for whatever reason, whether it's just social media or everybody's sensitive about everything or whatever. But I think just definitely, like you said, those old school coaches, that's my way or the highway. Even some of the guys that are old school, they came around. I mean, they've had to conform and adjust because today's player is different. They're smarter. They know when you're telling them BS. You say, hey, this is the way it is, and they can go to Google, they can look that up and say, no, it's not true. And so kids are smarter. They sniff things out. But as far as the relationship goes, yeah, I definitely think that it's more prevalent today. You have to be able to connect to players a lot more than you could back in the day. Obviously, there's not as many Bobby Knights, and that's for a reason.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I look back on it, and maybe it's just, again, like you said, I think social media has something to do with it. I think the way that we can all be connected, the fact that you're in Arkansas and we're here in Ohio and we're having a discussion, the two of us would have never been able to connect even 15, 20 years ago. And I think just because we're so interconnected, it makes those relationships, people just are aware of how important those relationships are. Whereas I think in the past, it was very easy to be insular and kind of just have your own little island, your own little program, and nobody kind of knew what was going on in there. And, coach can kind of dictate what happens. And now, because everything's so open and people are so connected, I think it's led to just an improvement in the relationship between coaches and players. And I know one of the things we've talked to with all the coaches that we've had on the podcast is just how important those relationships have been, whether it's relationships with other coaches or whether it's that player-coach relationship that, 15 years down the line, the coach gets a call from somebody that was on their team and just says, hey, thanks, coach, for, this piece of advice you gave me, or thanks for, pushing me to be my best, or whatever the case may be. And I think that as coaches, that's one of the things that relationships give us, is that good feeling from knowing that we're making an impact on the kids and the people that are around us in our coaching life. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I agree totally. I've actually became pretty good friends with Josh Metcalf. We text from time to time, and I heard him speak several times, in person. I think I've seen him speak 3 times, and he said something that always stuck with me. He said, back when he was in LA and he was living in the closet of a gym and he was training players, he said, you guys know who Joshua Metcalf is? I guess that's the first thing I should say. He's an author.
Okay.
He's an author, and he's kind of a mental training expert. He's worked with several, college and professional programs, all over the world. But he said, he asked God, he said, why, I know I'm the best. I'm the best mental training. I can work with, Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods, and all these type players. Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods. And he said, it was like God was speaking to him. And he said, until you start treating the kids that you have like Kobe Bryant or Tiger Woods, you will never have a player of that caliber. And that always stuck with me. It's like you have to give, whether it's that little 3rd grade girl or it's the Division I college girl or an NBA player, whether it's Joel Embiid, you have to give every amount of energy, every amount of knowledge that you have. And that's tough. And I think that's what separates me is I spoke to a group the other night. And I told them that. I said, I treat every player the same. I give everything I have to the time that I have with that player. And that's just like kind of always stuck with me, because whether it's Joel Embiid, when they start to see themselves improve, or they start to get it, or they start to perfect that skill in a workout, their confidence starts to improve. And it's like magic. I mean, it's like pixie dust. I mean, it's just something that they start changing, they grow, and it's an amazing thing to see and experience. Whether it's, again, self-improvement, seeing a player get better at something is, I think, the ultimate, thing that a coach loves, whether it be on or off the floor. Just that teaching. That's the same way with parenting, with teaching kids. Once you can see, that confidence start to build, and they're working at stuff, and they're getting it, so to speak. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, because to me, what you're trying to get across to people is that it's about the experience that you're providing for your client, in this case your player, and whether that player is, as you said, a third grade girl or an NBA player, your goal is to provide them with that 5-star experience, regardless of what their talent level is, regardless of what they can maybe do for you in return. You're going to provide them with the same level of effort and intensity and commitment that you would regardless of what their position is. And I think that, again, that could be basketball training, that could be any other business in the world. If you're dedicated to providing somebody with a 5-star experience, you're going to be ahead of 99.9% of the competitors that you have in your business. So I want to ask you about how you go about, because I think there are probably coaches that are out here listening that wonder, well, how does Jon go about making a full-time living as a basketball skills trainer? Because there's a lot of guys that are doing this as a side hustle. Maybe they're teachers, maybe they're coaching a high school team, maybe they're just a guy who has a regular job in the business world, and they have a basketball background and they hang their shingle out, and now they're doing training, or maybe they're doing some things and they have good intentions and they really want to get to that point. How have you gone about being able to do it on a full-time basis, and what recommendations would you have for people? I can probably guess a couple of them, but what recommendations would you have for people who are out there that want to try to give it a go to make it a full-time gig?
Well, again, it goes back to relationships. And when I first moved here, I was actually placed here, and I talked to Drew when we first talked, and he said, hey, I want to place you in the Springfield, Missouri area, which is, I'm from Missouri. And so I love the Springfield area. I got recruited by Missouri State, Southwest Missouri State at that time. And, ended up, he was actually placing a few guys. Jason Fry at that time was making a commute, and that was kind of his area, and that kind of ruffled some feathers. And so I said, hey, whoa, I'm up for whatever. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And Jason at that time was actually making the commute from St. Louis all the way to Springdale, Arkansas. He was working out a couple different programs in this area, Springdale and Springdale Harbor. And, he said, hey, look, I'm not really ready to give up the Springfield, Missouri area. Just because I'm so, connected right now with that area and have a lot of kids and a lot of programs. But, would you be willing to move to the Northwest Arkansas area? And so, man, it was scary, going from a comfort zone and a good job to totally changing. And again, it goes back to Drew. Drew really hit me in the mouth when I got out there. I mean, literally, it was like on purpose. We got done with the first couple workouts, and he was like, so, man, what are you doing? Like, what, and I said, I'm coaching high school. I'm in my comfort zone. And he said, man, what's the best part of your day, Beck? And I said, it's no question. It's practice. He said, no, break it down further. What's the best part of your day? And I said, probably skill development, probably working, with guards. No. What's the best part of your day? I was like, probably, teaching guards to come off ball screens or, come off pin downs, because that's what I had to do, And he said, okay, so why would you not make that your full-time job? What are you scared of? Are you scared you're not going to make it? Are you scared to get out of your comfort zone? Are you scared you're going to fail? You can't be scared, And literally, that was selfish reasons, that was the reason I went out there. It was, do I want to do this full time? Can I do this full time? And obviously, once I got out there and realized how much fun it was and how he has, the ultimate job, I was like, I can do this. I can make this my full-time living. And then once I've gotten here, I've been hired by Walmart. It's just been a crazy, and Jason give me a hard time. He'll call me and be like, hey, remember when you were scared? Remember when you didn't know if you wanted to go to Northwest Arkansas? And next thing you know, I'm connected with nearly every program in this area, and Walmart hires me as their, and Walmart is the home office here in Bentonville.
Right.
There's 35,000 employees here at Walmart when you guys see the bottled waters and all that at Bentonville, Arkansas. But, they ended up hiring me as their basketball trainer here at the Walton Life Fitness Center. And so just things, again, I had to go out there and I had to have Drew basically punch me in the mouth and say, what are you doing, man? And he gave me a lot of courage. And I don't know whether I would have or not if I wouldn't have went out there, or whether he would have said those things. But I know once he did, it changed things for me. And so, man, I've been out here and haven't looked back. But as far as the advice I have, number one is get a great working relationship with the coaches. That's the biggest thing, is they have to know that you have their program, their kids, their, best interests at heart. And if you can do that, that's going to help you. It's going to help you with facilities. It's going to help you with buy-in. It's going to help you with, I was introduced the other night in Bentonville West and Bentonville High School, and that they're big rivalries. They had a huge high school, over 5,000 students. They basically had to split it in half because they were growing so big because of the Walmart effect. And the Bentonville Basketball Club is their youth development program. And so they said, we're not going to introduce this guy with a bunch of different stuff about his playing days or about what he does. We're just going to tell you this. They said he's been endorsed and backed by both girls and boys coaches from both Bentonville High School and Bentonville West. And literally there's 50 coaches and they all just kind of gasped, like, whoa, what? Because I think it's one of those rivalries where they just don't agree on anything.
Right, exactly.
They're not going to agree. And so that was a big compliment to me. But again, it goes back to, I built that relationship when I got here. I went literally my first few months here. I didn't necessarily think about, I got to get kids. I thought about, I'm going to go to every high school program in this area and I'm going to watch them practice. And that's what I did. I went to every high school program, girls, boys. I went in Springdale. I went to Harbor. I went to Fayetteville. I went to, and so on and so forth. And I just watched practices, and I got to know coaches. And so
are those just cold calls? Like you just call up the coach and say, "Hey, I'm Jon Beck with Pure Sweat, and I'd like to come in and watch you practice. And here's kind of what I do." And or how'd you go about getting those relationships started? Because again, you obviously didn't have those relationships prior to, because you weren't from the area.
I did, and I've always been a basketball junkie, and I've talked to Greg White so many times. I mean, years ago when I was a high school coach, I would direct message him on Twitter and text him, and so. As far as knowing him, though, physically meeting him, he was at a Drew Hanlen academy one time, but I never went up and introduced myself. I didn't even know he was there at that time. But Jason Fry was so instrumental because he was already working with a few of the programs. And so he would help make those connections too. I mean, literally he would text and say, "Hey, Coach Hunsaker at Springdale, this is Jon Beck. This is one of the best guys I know. Hey, Coach Hunsaker is one of the best coaches I know in the area. Oh my gosh, he's great with their kids." And then he would help make those first few connections. And then, man, I just kept on, and kept on and kept, and one player worked to two, and literally you guys had Brad Stamps. And without Brad Stamps, I mean, he was such a instrumental guy, because he calls me when I first moved here, and because he's such good friends and same staff with Coach White. And he says, "Hey, I got this kid that really loves basketball. He's a really good player, and I want you to start working with him." And so he was my first client in this area. And he's actually just so happens to be a Division I player and the best. He was player of the year last year in their conference, in this big boy conference up here, the 7A. And, he's returning as a senior this year. And so he's got a chance. He's a really good player. He signed with the University of Central Arkansas and played in the EYBL circuit for the Woods Elite and Colin Cooper. And so Coach Stamps, again, it just goes back to building that relationship, going to their practices and And man, did I get lucky just being at the right place at the right time. And I've just built that. And now it's like Colin's my little brother. I mean, literally I work that dude out twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And I've been doing it ever since I moved here, last October. And I just haven't looked back. And that his success, obviously working with him, turned into 5 kids from that school, which turned into some girls from that school, which turned into, and I think now I'd lose count, but I think it's somewhere around 350 different kids I've worked with since I've lived here. And so it's grown. And again, it just goes back to building relationships with coaches. I call coaches and I say, hey, I'm going to work with so-and-so. What do I need to get them really good at to help you in your system and to help their role? And I told you last night on the phone is they're just like, what kind of a trainer are you? No trainers. Nobody's
ever called
or cared or asked me my input. And ultimately, that's the coach. That's the guy or the girl you have to please and be really good for. That's the guy that puts, the girl that puts, your name in the scorebook. And so, again, it goes back to getting them really good at what they do in that system. And of course, you can work on things that are going to translate to college later on or whatever. But, again, it's just about perfecting the role they're in. So that's the first thing is you have to build great relationships with all the coaches, and you have to get on the same page. And it's the same thing. And again, that goes back to Drew. I mean, he was working out Bradleyville, Florida, and I think he tells a story where Billy Donovan walks in and says, "Who are you? Who do you think? Like, no, this staff doesn't know you. No one knows who you are, and you should start introducing yourself to places. You should start trying to get on the same page with us. That's really going to help your credibility. It's going to help you." And so, again, so many things I've learned from him. It's stories that help me in my career now. And I have to learn from his mishaps. He's lived it since he's been very young. And so I go back to building that relationship, helping that high school coach. That's ultimately, what I have to do. You have to also know that you can't take anything personal. Workouts come and go. You have to, again, like anything in life, if you want to be really good at it, you have to, I don't have much of a social life. I'm a workaholic. I mean, I always have been. I've always been, I was that way as a player, I'm that way as a professional now, but you have to, be able to work crazy hours. I mean, that's the thing too is, sometimes, especially obviously in the off season, you're working 10, 12, 14-hour days. But then, now that school started back, I do have some homeschool kids and I have some private school kids that only go to school a couple days a week that I work out during the day. But for the most part, obviously the hours change, throughout the year. The school year, it's once 3 o'clock hits, it's a lot more busy. From 3 to 9 or 10 is obviously your hours shift. Like I said, minus some homeschool kids or some private school kids that work out here and there during the day. But you have to be able to work crazy hours. You have to be able to do a lot of things for free. And it's just a crazy business model I have, and it's just kind of something I've done. But I always tell clients that reach out to me is, hey, there may be that disconnect. You never know. But if you just want to come in and get a free workout in, come on in. And if you like it, let's get you signed up. Let's get you, a future, and let's try to, build a plan and get going. So I never usually charge for the first workout. There are very few. If some people just say, "Oh no, we're ready, we're good," we
right, we're for sure, right, for sure, we're sold already.
Then we'll sign up. But
right.
Other than that, I just say, hey, look, because again, it may be, a disconnect. Obviously, you hope that's not there, but again, my big questions are, do they love basketball? And that's just everything that comes along with being a player, not just, a workout warrior or just a guy that loves to play pickup games or play, games, but, all the stuff that comes along with being a good player. Is this something you see yourself doing and becoming the best you can, possibly become? And then do they crave improvement? I mean, obviously, if they're reaching out to you, somebody does. Whether it's the parent or, them, somebody is craving improvement because they wouldn't be, paying money and coming to you, outside of school hours or outside their regular team practice to try to get better. And then the biggest thing is, are they good people? Are they good kids? If they're good kids, they crave improvement and they absolutely, they love everything that comes along with being a good player, then we're probably going to have a really great working relationship.
For sure. So let's wrap up, Jon, with one last question for you, and that is what is a day-to-day, what does your schedule look like day-to-day? Let's take like a day in the off season in the middle of July, let's say, and then how does that compare to a day during the season where you're working with, obviously the kids are then in school, they have their team practices. How much are you working with kids during the season? So what do those 2 days typically look like? A summer day during the off season and then a day during the actual high school basketball season. What does your schedule look like on one of those typical days?
It's very similar to when I was in Los Angeles with Drew. We mainly worked out of 3 gyms while I was there, and sometimes 4, but mostly it was, somewhere on UCLA's campus. And then Drew has access. He's got 2 gyms, St. Bernard's High School and then Beverly Hills High School. And so, you get gym access at this gym. Let's say at St. Bernard's, we start at 8 a.m. and we'll go till 2 p.m. And then you have from 2 to 4, you have a little break where you can grab some lunch and then drive across, because everything in LA is, depending on traffic. So you drive across, and then you start at, Beverly Hills High School at 4 o'clock. And you'll go, 4 to 8. And then you'll have a break between 8 and 9. You go back to St. Bernard's from, 9 to midnight or 9 to 1 a.m. or whatever. And so it's very similar. My days are similar here. It's just I usually work at the high school or the junior high or the college of the player that I'm working with. And so typical July day for me, it's usually an 8 a.m. workout, maybe, 8, 9, 10 at one gym, and I drive across to different high school or different community center, because there are some times when, it's a community center. If they don't have access to their high school gym at that time, or they got a team camp going on or whatever. But, and then it's, you go over here to this gym, but it's just, I commute so much. I mean, I literally go from anywhere from, I went all the way south to Alma, which is probably close to an hour. And then I go anywhere, north up to Gravette, which is probably, 30 minutes north here, and it's, again, you're close to Missouri and close to Oklahoma over here in Northwest Arkansas. And so, but as far as that goes, I'm like a hairstylist when it comes to scheduling workouts. I don't take a day off. I mean, I work 7 days a week, and I literally have so many clients or teams. Sometimes I work with AAU programs, college players, or obviously a lot of college players come back, in the summertime. And, what they say goes. I mean, I've never once, I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have, I have coaching buddies, but I just have very few friends in this area, really, because again, I just work, and so if they say, hey, 8 a.m., I put them in the book, I put them in my calendar book, and we just go, and I literally just plan out my day, and I try to make it as full and as busy as I can, because I love to work and I just like to stay busy. So in July, it's very busy. It's literally insane, because it's going from team workout to small group workout to an individual, back to a small group, back to an individual, back to a team. And it's just, again, I think Drew just taught me, you can work a lot harder than you think, and you can, sometimes you think, man, I'm not going to be able to eat till 3 p.m. But you know what? Those are the days you have the most energy. So it's crazy. It's because you have good workouts or whatever. But, and then you try to go grab a smoothie and go to the next one, it starts at 5, and usually anywhere from, I have small breaks here and there, but 8 a.m. usually till, 8 or 9 p.m. is what a July day looks like. And then a school day, obviously, like now, a day like today is different because, again, school is in session. So I usually wake up, and I'm an early riser. I don't just sleep a whole crazy lot. I do get quality sleep. I try to be in bed by, 11 p.m. And I usually wake up anywhere from, 6 to 7. Sometimes it's 5:30 just naturally, but usually I just kind of wake up in between 6 and 7. And I get up, I check emails, I, talk to people about podcasts, I do, whatever. I do a little bit of social media stuff. I watch a lot of film. I watch a lot of film. I try to stay on top of everything. I mean, I'm obviously, Drew has his Drew Hanlen Basketball Academy, and we have things in our company we have to stay on top of, and just constantly become, again, I think if you become stagnant and you're not doing everything you can to become the best at what you're doing, somebody else is going to get better. And I send out as many texts. I try to stay on top of, hey, we're working out at this time, so-and-so, and just stay on top of scheduling. I usually get a workout in on my own. Obviously, I have breakfast. And then, throughout the week, again, I have some homeschool kids that'll say, hey, let's do a 10 a.m. workout or a 12 noon or whatever. And then usually at 3 o'clock, I start I have a lot of teams I work with in the area. I mentioned that Fayetteville High School, every Monday, I have to go do their strength and conditioning program. And I usually start that about 2:30. It's probably a 30-minute drive to Fayetteville from where I live. And so, it stays busy. I work at literally every high school in the area, from Gravette, Bentonville West, Bentonville High, Springdale Harbor, Fayetteville, and even Rogers, this summer. So it's just been a lot of different high schools, and I work with both boys and girls and junior highs and whatever. And so I just try to stay as involved and be, that's one thing Drew kept saying out there, was like, man, just constantly add value. Don't turn down basketball opportunities, because I used to ask him, like, are you scared, like, going in there for, first time guy, you're going to work out, this guy, are you ever, like, nervous about it? He's like, no, because I know I'm about to add value. I just have that mindset, like, I'm going to go in here and add value. I'm going to help this player, and so, again, it's just something you write in your notes, and it gives you confidence. And, learning from him and being under his tutelage, just knowing that, again, it makes me have confidence, because I know I've learned from the best. And so I can walk in that gym, no matter if it's, an Arkansas Razorback, like this summer, Desi Silas reached out to me, an Arkansas Razorback player here, an SEC player. And, again, you don't have any fear. It's like, hey, I've worked out Zach LaVine and Andrew Wiggins and Joel Embiid and Jason Tatum. And so I'm not, so you just have that, again, you have that confidence, but I treat him and her just like, an NBA player. Just go in there and do the best job you can, add value, and, just bring energy and know, I want them to know, man, that guy knows his stuff, when they leave. And not for my sake, not because, oh man, he's full of himself. He knows it's to help them, to be the best they can possibly become.
Well, it's like we talked about before. I think, one, when you're prepared, and then two, when you're dedicated to providing that 5-star experience that we talked about earlier, when those are the two things that you can bring to the table, those are two things that no matter what type of player you're working with, you're going to be able to have success. So, Jon, I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast with us. This has been just a pleasure for us to talk to you. I think you've provided a ton of information that anybody who is thinking about getting into the skills training business, I think you've given them a lot of food for thought in terms of what it takes to be successful and what it takes to really make an impact on the players that you're working with. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could share how people could get in touch with you, if anybody wants to reach out and maybe have a conversation with you or pick your brain a little bit, if you wouldn't mind sharing your contact information with them, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Just on Twitter. I'm not an Instagram guy yet. I still haven't jumped in, but on Twitter, I'm just at Coach Jon Beck. And then on Facebook, you can find me at just Jon Beck. Email jbeck@puresweatbasketball.com. And you can reach me at any time. So I really appreciate you guys having me on. I hope it's been beneficial. There's so many more millions of things we could talk about, but again, I hope I've added a little bit of value.
No, you definitely have, and we really appreciate you jumping on the podcast, Jon. And to everybody out there, we will catch you on our next episode.
Head Start Basketball's Player Development Academy offers Cleveland area players a unique opportunity to improve their basketball skills. Regardless of a player's age, skill level, or position, training with Head Start Basketball will elevate your game to the next level. Do you want to improve your ball handling, become a better shooter, or develop into a more skilled, confident player? Our Academy classes offer training that's designed to do just that. Our training sessions are innovative and will have you learning skills that are transferable to actual games. We have 4 different class skill levels for boys and girls, ages 4 and up. All Player Development Academy classes will be held at the Strongsville Recreation Center. For more information or to get registered, please visit www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.